Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we have the pleasure of having Jennifer Woodward back on our podcast. She talks a lot about hormones and diet, nutrition. She's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and we're excited to have her back on to talk about hormones and insomnia. Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Great to see you guys again. How's it going?
It's going great. Janet, what do you want to talk about when we introduce insomnia and hormones? I bet you have a comment on that.
Oh, man. You know what? I feel like this is like one of the top problems for women. Would you not think that as well, Jennifer, that this is something that is a major issue?
It is one of the things I get asked most often about, for sure.
Well, I mean, one thing we see quite often is, we see a 40-year-old woman come into our office and she hasn't been able to sleep for a couple of years, and she's on all kinds of different medications for either anxiety or sleep, Ambien, lorazepam, Xanax, you name it. And then you start asking her some history, and it's like, so when did you start having sleep issues? Well, when I was 42 and I started having some irregular cycles, and it's like, oh, well, bingo. I mean, this must be hormone related. You don't lack Ambien. I know I'm being cynical, but I kind of have to sometimes. So, Jennifer, will you discuss that?
That is one of my favorite things to say and think about also, Shawn, is, your sleep issues are not an Ambien deficiency. It's so true. There's got to be an underlying mechanism as to why these women aren't sleeping. And sometimes, I will hear from men that aren't sleeping, but I would say 90% of the time it's women who are having trouble sleeping in their late 30s, early 40s, mid 50s. That tends to be the time when this hits a woman's body. And I also love to tell my clients, it takes a lot of energy to sleep well. So if we do not have energy in our reserves, mitochondrial energy, cellular energy, we are not going to be able to sleep well at night. And for women as well, and men, right? Every living being, good sleep at night starts first thing in the morning. So that's the other thing that so many women don't realize, is that during the day, they're setting themselves up to either sleep really well at night or to sleep poorly at night. We can definitely go into what that looks like, but suffice it to say that women who are overstressed and overworked and undernourished are absolutely going to be underslept, because they just won't be able to have the stress hormone profile that they need to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Yes, Jan, I bet you have some comments on that.
Yeah, I see that very often, that cortisol is peaking at the wrong time. And so lifestyle plays a huge role. And so it isn't just the hormones. I mean, the hormones play together, but there is some other things that we need to do throughout the day. And I agree with that, because you'll see people that they may wake up with some energy, but man, by midday, they're just crashed, or they're peaking at bedtime in their cortisol when they should be the other way around.
Oh, I definitely see that too. That flipped diurnal cortisol pattern is the bane of so many women's existence. And, a lot of us women will kind of slowly set ourselves up for that flipped diurnal cortisol pattern, which is just, as Janet was saying, elevated cortisol levels at night. Cortisol is our wake hormone, not just our stress hormone, but also our get up and go hormone, and then elevated daytime melatonin levels. So we're seeing a lot of brain fog and a lot of lethargy in our women, because we can actually, measure whether or not they have this sleepy hormone, melatonin, in their brains during the day, which is the opposite of what we want, right? So, it is a whole host of reasons that can get women to that stage. Again, not eating enough good food, right? Being way overstressed, never allowing their body to get back into balance from autonomic nervous system dysfunction, or they're so far into fight or flight that their cortisol levels are never going to come down, or they're so far parasympathetic where they've gone into almost this hibernation stage, and their bodies just don't have that metabolic energy that they need in order to, again, sleep well. Because it takes a lot of calories to sleep well. It takes a lot of energy to sleep well. And if we just don't have those reserves, then the body can't fall into a deep night's sleep.
Well, and we talk about it quite often. We talk about, humans being diurnal creatures. We're meant to be active during the day, and we're meant to sleep at night. And there's really three things that we can do to keep our bodies healthy, and that's sleep, diet, and exercise. And I believe those are in order of importance. Without sleep, you can exercise all you want. But if you're not sleeping, you're not ever going to get stronger, faster, or in better shape, because your body needs to recover when you sleep. And you eat all the good food you want. But the food that we eat, fuel for our bodies and the building blocks for our bodies, really is at night when we recover, when we're sleeping, is when that food is building all of our body.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point there, Shawn, that we are diurnal creatures. We are meant to be active during the day. We are meant to be restful at night. And how many of us are doing the opposite in our lives? You know, we are active at night. I can't tell you the number of women that tell me, well, I don't go to bed till 12 or 1 because that's my me time. Like, that's the only time that I have quiet, or that's when I'm getting stuff done around the house, or that's when I'm answering emails, because the rest of the day is so busy that that's the only time these women think that they have, you know, a quiet moment to themselves. So we've pushed into that rest and digest phase of our, you know, parasympathetic nervous system that should be really, you know, calm at night. It should be calm after, you know, 10 p.m. But ramping it up through extra work or answering emails or even just watching TV or scrolling through your phone, you know, is going to keep you in that fight or flight mode, keep your cortisol elevated. And that makes it damn near impossible to get to sleep. You know, if you've got elevated levels of cortisol, it's not that your mind is racing. It's not you necessarily that is preventing you from getting to sleep. It's your hormones. You know, your chemical messengers are sending the wrong signal, which is, hey, it's 12 p.m. It's noon. Like, let's go do something, instead of let's get ready for bed and start, you know, releasing melatonin and calming the nervous system so that we can get to sleep.
So we talk about being diurnal, and you talk about being, it's, you know, our sleep starts when we first get up in the morning. So let's go through what should be a healthy pattern to start you to get good sleep at night. Let's start with in the morning when you get up.
Fantastic. So first thing that you're going to want to do is get early sunlight exposure as early as possible. Again, if we're looking at some of those ancestral patterns that I know that both of you Needhams love, right? We have to get that early morning sun exposure. That's what our ancestors did, and that's what we need to do. So the pineal gland is going to recognize, you know, that we're getting that full spectrum wavelength of all the lights, every single light on the wavelength, the light spectrum. And it's going to start realizing that the body now needs to begin producing its daytime hormones, cortisol. So activating, you know, that pineal gland to know that, hey, it is morning outside, instead of just going straight into an LED lit room or straight in front of a screen, is going to be very important to set up the hormone cascade for that diurnal cortisol pattern. The other thing that you're going to want to do is start eating something. You know, like there is a case for intermittent fasting in really healthy people, but oftentimes women who are complaining of sleep issues are not really healthy people, right? They're often eating far too few calories, too few, you know, grams of fat, way too few, you know, grams of protein, oftentimes under eating carbohydrates as well. They're just malnourished. And so getting a good breakfast, a blood sugar balancing breakfast, including animal protein, first thing in the morning, 30 minutes after eating, is very helpful for setting up proper hormone balance and proper sleep balance later on in the day. The other thing I really encourage my clients to do is push actively into your rest throughout the day, as much as you're pushing into being productive, right? So scheduling in on your, literally scheduling in on your calendar, you know, 10 minutes to do a breath work, you know, a breath work break, some box breathing, 10 minutes to lay outside in your backyard and just get off your devices and get some sun and get some rest. If we're not able to achieve that autonomic nervous system balance throughout the day, if we're constantly pushing ourselves to stay in that fight or flight sympathetic mode, then it's impossible for the body to suddenly switch and, you know, turn the off switch and get into parasympathetic mode, that rest and digest mode. So I'm encouraging my clients, you know, all throughout the day, how can we get that nervous system balance? Like, how can we start rewiring the brain and, you know, the hormone system to actually get that nervous system balance and get out of fight or flight mode? So eating does that, breathing does that, deep breathing, you know, resting does that. And again, if you're not, you know, complicit in being active in pursuing your rest and nervous system balance, then the default mode for most women is going to be, you know, fight or flight sympathetic mode, and they're just not going to sleep well.
Absolutely. That was good. Janet, do you have anything to add to that, or any questions about that?
Well, I'll add to this that I think one of the things that women forget is that if we don't take care of ourselves, then our family is going to suffer. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to women about this, we do need to have to give ourselves the right and the freedom. So there's no guilt, because I think a lot of times it's always, oh, I need to do this and I need to do that. And that to-do list becomes enormous. And many people just try to push through that. And I think you got to give yourself permission. It's okay. It's not wrong to take that time to yourself. And a lot of times I think you're actually more productive throughout the day when you do take those 10 minutes or that half hour or whatever it needs to be, just to relax and to regather yourself, because what we think is so important right in the instant may not always be so true.
100% agree with you on that. And, if you think about it,
you can tell she's a mom, right?
Yeah, yes, I feel you, Janet. and that was kind of going to be my analogy. It was going to be a mom analogy. Like, I have a 16-year-old daughter. If my 16-year-old daughter comes to me, and she's done this, a couple of times, and she just starts crying, like, she's not a crier, but she comes to me and she is crying because she is so overwhelmed by sports and school and work and friends. I mean, there are just a million little things on this 16-year-old's mind, and her body just can't handle it. Like, it starts to break down. So if she comes to me crying from being, overstressed, like, I'm not going to go tell her, hey, make another list and do another chore, right? I'm going to be like, let's have a snack, let's have a back rub, and let's get you to bed early. And women won't do that for themselves. They'll do it for other people, but they won't do it for themselves. And, that's obviously going to do a lot better, a lot more good for my daughter than just pushing her when she's already, kind of pushed beyond her max and her capacity. And so my encouragement is just like yours, Janet. If we cannot take care of ourselves, how are we going to take care of all of those people who depend on us? And it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel natural, because women are so used to being stuck in that really, like, addictive. It's like cortisol it's a steroid hormone. It's addictive. Yeah. It's very physically addictive for us to be stressed out all the time. We like it. Our bodies like it. But if we are not able to disengage from that, then we're not going to be able to sleep well. And just to kind of come full circle there, I know, Shawn, you did ask me, like, what would you do all day long? So I kind of got up, I think, till probably 7:00 at night. But then I also really love my girls to take an Epsom salt bath. I think we've talked about this before, just getting that transdermal magnesium, getting the trace minerals through Epsom salt, getting that hot bath where you literally can't do anything else. You can't do the dishes if you're in the bath. So that's one of the other benefits of taking a bath. And
Put your phone away.
You put your phone away, right? I let my phone be next to me, but it's only because I am listening to Asian Zen spa meditation on Pandora. That's the only reason. And then, that increase of body temperature, taking a hot bath, increasing your body temperature just a few degrees, is then later, within 30 minutes, is going to allow that body temperature to then subsequently lower, which allows your body to put itself into deep sleep. We have to have a decrease of 2 degrees of body temperature in order to fall asleep and stay asleep well. So the Epsom salt bath kind of artificially does that for a body that isn't naturally already in those sleep rhythms. Another reason I love an Epsom salt bath. Finally, finish it up with like a Kindle Paperwhite or a magazine or a book. Nothing like too scary, right? Or too action oriented. Some, I like the gentle fiction genre before bed. I read other stuff during the day, but I just want my brain to turn off at night. So a little bit of, literally turning your brain off with some easy reading. These can be really great things to do to get a good night's sleep.
And let's also add on there about, well, I guess we'll just finish it off. You're talking about temperature. And I know I did research a few years ago and heard the same thing that, our bodies sleep better when it's 3 to 4 degrees cooler. So we actually, almost every night our air conditioner runs in our house, even in the winter, to cool our house down to like 66 degrees because that's what we sleep at. And last night I overrode it for a while because we were kind of up and around, and it was 71 degrees and I couldn't sleep. Janet was bugging me and saying, can you sleep? I'm like, no, it's too hot. So there's something to be said about that. And once the temperature got down to 66, I could sleep a lot better. I think there's something to be said about that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. That's a very interesting experiment that you ran, that you saw the difference like that quick.
Yeah. And the other thing we do is we start turning lights down. Like our
Mhm.
lights aren't bright, at a certain time of the day. In the evening, you just have less lights. And I think that does cue you in. I mean, our brain needs to have cues. And so the less light, and I think the phone and the computer, is it blue lights? I believe that is what's triggering us there. So, the less you do that right before going to bed, I think that helps tremendously.
And I think, ancestrally speaking, if you think about what our bodies were, unless you lived at the equator where it's pretty much always the same temperature, although it does cool off at night, it makes sense. It gets dark at night, it cools off at night. That's when our body should be sleeping. So it makes total sense.
Yep. Yeah. I just love coming on the show and talking with you guys about ancestral living because it is just so much fun for me. But if you continue, with that thought process, 200 years ago, my grandmother could not stay up until 12 in the morning or 1 in the morning. Like she probably had more things to do than I did, taking care of a household and a farm and children. But physically, she wasn't able to do that. I mean, it wasn't cheap to burn candles or be one of the first people in your neighborhood to have the Edison bulb, right? So when the sun went down, naturally people's rhythms responded. Everything slowed down a little bit. The only thing to do, was to go to bed or light a candle and read for a little bit. You just couldn't be productive. And I think that was such a wisdom. The natural processes of just our ancestors for, millennia is so much wiser than
Right.
what we, force ourselves to do today. Because I know you guys see this in your practice all the time and in the pharmacy, we are not keeping up with the demands that modern society places on us, and women, especially perimenopausal women, I think are taking the brunt of that. We are still very hormonally sensitive beings thrust into this environment that's kind of like the Wild West, of technology, and our hormones just aren't responding well. And sleep's one of the first cries for the body to tell us, hey, things are not okay here.
Well, and let's talk a little bit more, get more specific about hormones. When I think of sleep, and Janet and I go over many times a day with women, when I think of sleep and I think of hormones, I think of progesterone. Do you have anything to add to that, Janet?
Yeah, I work with progesterone, but also melatonin.
Well, of course.
Yeah, I think those two go hand in hand. Because I feel like when we get, especially our perimenopausal women, there's such a imbalance that starts happening with some of them between their estrogen and progesterone. And so I have found that progesterone simply helps. And I agree with you also nutrient wise. I'm sure magnesium plays a big role with that too.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see the same thing. I mean, when we're running like a salivary hormone panel or a Dutch test, if a woman tells me she's not sleeping, I can almost, predict, I'd say 75, 90% of the time that the progesterone level is low. Progesterone is going to act on the same receptors in the brain, that sleepy hormones like GABA are also going to act on. And progesterone is very calming. It's not just calming for the body and the nervous system, it's calming for the brain, and the brain has to be in kind of a sedative state in order for us to go to sleep. And so I've seen it work numerous times that just by doing some, topical or oral progesterone, a woman's brain can calm down enough to allow her to sleep. And that's not just like a quick fix. Don't just go ask her. I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose, treat, or prescribe, right? You guys are doctors, so you can diagnose, treat, or prescribe. But
we're pharmacists.
We're pharmacists, so we don't. But we make those recommendations very often.
Right. But just don't go willy-nilly, asking for progesterone. It's always right to test first if you guys are listening to this. But it definitely, as Janet said, this could be one of the main reasons why a perimenopausal woman might not be able to sleep, because their progesterone levels just tend to sink so low so quickly in perimenopause that it could be a shock for the body. And sleep, again, is one of the main cries that something is wrong hormonally.
Yeah. And I guess I talk about progesterone, although melatonin, when we think about the true sleep hormone, melatonin is probably the most important. But typically, we see problems manifest, at least when they come to see us, in women's 40s and 50s, and that's usually when their progesterone levels are starting to fluctuate, and maybe have some cycling issues, and a little bit of oral progesterone can usually help them. I prefer oral progesterone because when We swallow progesterone. Our liver metabolizes it directly into allopregnanolone, which is a neurohormone which helps to modulate GABA, which helps to inhibitory. So it helps to calm us down. So that's why we recommend a lot of oral progesterone for any woman that has sleep problems.
Love that. And that could just be so helpful to have, professionals like you guys sharing that information with people instead of just saying like, oh, ask your doctor about Ambien or,
Right.
a pill or just, whatever it is. Because as you guys brought up in the beginning, it's probably not, a sleeping pill deficiency. There really are some root causes. So that's the other thing that I think a lot of women don't realize. They don't have to accept insomnia as normal. Because at this point in their life, late 30s to early 50s, man, women are still raising children. They're taking care of parents. They're working professionally and probably like toward the top of their game professionally. And they're just very, very busy and a lot is expected out of them. So for a woman who's doing so much to also not be able to sleep can be really, it pulls a lot of hope away, from your life. If you realize, like I speak personally, from personal experience that, the nights, it was 9 months of insomnia for me after the birth of my third child. And I began to get panic attacks. Like my heart would start fluttering and I'd start to break out in a sweat and start feeling panicky. Like when I would just walk past the bedroom door to my room during the day, knowing that I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. Like that's how ingrained that sleeplessness was in me. And I did begin to lose hope. Like I've not been that depressed and anxious ever again in my life as when sleep was taken from me. So I know firsthand just how devastating it can be to not be able to sleep when you have to care for, your family. So I just hope that women realize like it's not normal. It's common, but not normal to not be able to sleep. And there are definitely things that you can do about it from a hormonal perspective to get that sleep back online. I sleep great now, most nights.
Well, that's a really good point. You bring that up because we have normalized so many different diseases, and let's just call them sicknesses. We've normalized diabetes, we've normalized hypertension, we've normalized many different diseases when our bodies weren't created to be that way. Right. So you got to find out what's missing in your life. Same insomnia is the same way. Our bodies were meant to sleep like babies. And I think if ancestrally speaking, if you look at what our ancestors did, they slept like babies. They worked hard all day long. And when the sun went down, they went to sleep and they slept hard. And I'm sure there were some, bouts with insomnia, but it was far and few between. So we don't have to accept any kind of disease as normal. Because it is reversible, even though our traditional medical system doesn't say it is.
Fully agree with you there. Yes. Yeah, that is. And a lot of times, again, if a woman goes to her, traditional doctor and complains of insomnia, like there will just be one offer given, which will be, a sleeping pill. But there's so many other ways that women can take care of themselves. And I again, want them to realize like it takes a lot of energy to sleep well. So to ask yourself and do an assessment of your diet. Are you getting enough animal protein at regular intervals throughout the day to balance out your blood sugar and make sure that you're creating that cellular energy? Are you pushing into rest throughout the day, like we talked about, like scheduling time off for yourself and doing deep breathing and taking Epsom salt baths and turning off screens? Are you getting proper exercise? And that's, one thing we haven't yet touched on, but we've talked about on past episodes. Like I see a lot of women who are either exercising way too much and keeping themselves in like a fight or flight state, or they just are so tired that they can't exercise at all. And again, their bodies go into that extreme parasympathetic state where they're almost in like hibernation, and they're gaining weight and they're tired all the time. Their thyroid starts to slow down. They're cold. And they don't have any energy in order to move naturally, to move kind of ancestrally, like lifting heavy things and walking long distances over, the period of the day. So proper exercise can absolutely help with a good night's sleep. Like Shawn, you just said it, our ancestors worked super hard during the day. They were very physical. And as a compensatory mechanism, they slept very deeply at night. I have to make myself, like I sit in this darn chair, like a couple hours a day, try to not stay here too long, but, I have to put it on my schedule to go out and lift weights, to, go on walks by myself and with my dogs and with my husband, like these are things that wouldn't necessarily, they don't happen to me because my life is not set up that way. I have to be really active in planning for those things. So, that's the other thing that women really have to do is make themselves and their functional fitness a priority, because it's not just going to happen in our, day-to-day, because so many of us have kind of sedentary jobs.
No, you definitely have to schedule it. And I will say, on exercise, don't exercise too late at night. If you want your body to be able to sleep and relax, don't exercise too late at night. And I will tell you, as I get older, that one gets to be more important. Jan and I, 30 years ago, when we go to the gym at 10 o'clock at night. And then we go to bed at 11. I mean, crazy.
More.
But now it seems like if our workout is not done by 7, our sleep is screwed up.
Yeah.
I love that you guys work out together. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's fun. It can be fun.
Yep.
Although until you're trying to coach your wife too much, then it might not be too fun.
There are moments.
Oh man. Yep. I fully hear you on that, Janet. Did I ask you if I wanted you to critique my squat? That's what I told my husband the other day.
Yeah.
So, Jennifer, as we wind this podcast up, what are some, in 2 sentences, if you wanted to talk about hormones and insomnia, or just insomnia in general for women? That's what we've kind of been focused on. How would you sum that up?
I would say focus on your health early in the day so you can sleep well at night. Get early morning sun and get the majority of your animal protein containing calories during the day, because everything's naturally going to slow down a little bit more at night. So you need to take advantage of your metabolic patterns of your body and your diurnal cortisol pattern to optimize sleep later in the day. Protein and early morning light.
I wanted to mention something. Go back on, we were talking about our bodies liking cortisol, and I wanted just to add to that. Our bodies get addicted to cortisol because it makes us feel good. It makes us keep going, but our bodies like it until it doesn't like it anymore. Right? And then you're just chronically fatigued because your body can't even produce cortisol. We've seen those patients. So that's why it's important to take care of these issues before you get there.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that. They just want a quick fix. I'm like that too. I'm not judging. I want a quick fix too.
All of us.
Yeah. It is so important to nip it in the bud. And the more people that are listening to shows like yours, they're curious, they're passionate about their own health. They want that preventative care. They want that, holistic care. It's important for us to realize, we can prevent a lot of these diseases. We can even prevent something like insomnia that, perimenopausal and menopausal women have been told is inevitable. It doesn't have to be. We have to put the work in ahead of time, in order to mitigate some of those damages down the road.
And Jennifer, as always, we thank you for being on the show. If anybody wants to get a hold of you or has any more questions, how can they get a hold of you?
Yes, I am online at jenniferwoodwardnutrition.com. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Jennifer Woodward Nutrition. I would love to talk about sleep and perimenopause if anybody has any questions.
Awesome. I love it. And tune in, listeners and viewers. Thank you for tuning in today, but tune in Wednesday when we have Dr. Courtney Sanfelice on our podcast. She's been on before. She's a pharmacist. She's going to be talking all about cortisol and how we regulate our cortisol. So it's going to be a good show Wednesday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And Jennifer, I so appreciate you being on today. You've helped us realize our goal, which is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. Thank you.
Thank you both for having me. Very much appreciate it.
Awesome. Listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Tune in Wednesday to our midweek podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you for listening.